All right, everyone, welcome to today's episode of Is It Prophecy here on Israel National Radio, Arut Sheva, and the show is syndicated as Messiah Hour on YouTube. Go to YouTube and type in Messiah Hour with Ari Louis and subscribe to the YouTube channel. It is free to do so. You can check out our previous episodes with Rabbi Yosef Mizrahi, Rabbi Ken Spiro, Dr. Joe Schroeder, and much, much more. Of course, emails messiahhour@gmail.com. Ever wondered what is the current plan with the peace process, and is it a plan that we can go to? On the line right now to speak about this is from Isra Pundit, and who gave a great speech on Monday, January 19th at the OU Center, Mr. Ted Belman. Mr. Belman, welcome back to the program.
Hi, welcome. I'm pleased to be with you.
Yes, absolutely. Now, you gave a great speech on Monday, January 19th. And one of the things I found very interesting is a lot of people that are pro-Israel do not like President Obama, but the truth is that there are a lot of presidents in previous history that have not been so pro-Israel with their actions. I want to go all the way to Ronald Reagan first, because a lot of people don't know he was responsible for bringing Arafat back, if you will. Tell us a bit about that.
Well, as you know, under Prime Minister Begin, Israel attacked the PLO in southern Lebanon with the intent of destroying them. They got to a certain point having to decide whether they're going to go all the way to Beirut and totally rout Arafat and the PLO. And they decided to do this against the wishes of Ronald Reagan. And they got to the point where they were ready to deliver the coup de grace to Arafat and his PLO terrorists who were hauled up in Beirut. And Ronald Reagan decided he was going to rescue Arafat, the arch-terrorist, who only a decade earlier had done all those plane bombings and attacks in airports, very, in recent memory. And he arranged for a U.S. boat to load up all these terrorists and whoever were left, and he shipped them to Tunisia to stay. So that was his role in protecting Arafat and his terrorists.
Also, Ronald Reagan is one of the few presidents who've never visited Israel. He was a two-term president, so he had 8 years to do so. I also found it interesting what you said in the speech at the OU Center regarding President Truman, because he was the first American president during Israel's statehood, if you will. Israel became a state in 1948. Truman was president. But even Truman did some things that were not pro-Israel, which is kind of shocking because Israel just began in its statehood. Tell us a bit about that.
Well, first of all, you're focusing on the president. My focus generally is on the State Department, which has been an implacable enemy of Israel from day one. And really, it's the State Department that runs the show in the main, and the presidents either go along hesitantly or willingly. In the case of Truman, he obviously fought the State Department and imposed on them the recognition of Israel when it declared itself a state. So he appeared to be a friend, and he had been in business with a Jewish partner for many years before he became president. But for one reason or another, he was very incensed that Israel, first of all, resulted the Arab refugees had left. It bothered him terribly, the exodus of 550,000 Arabs from the war zone, and he blamed Israel for that, and he demanded that Israel allow them to come back. He also demanded that Israel give up the extra territory that they acquired in the War of Independence and return to the partition lines. That bothered him. And here's the most incredible thing that bothered him was that Israel had the temerity to push for more aliyah now that they had declared themselves a state. And for some reason, he thought that was outrageous.
Which, again, is funny because the country just started. You'd figure they'd want to increase its population. Most countries tend to do that. Now, I know you didn't mention this in the speech, but I wanted to know if you could tell us, is there any particular reason why the State Department is anti-Israel? Is there something in there or in their agenda? I mean, why would they be against the country of Israel?
Oh, for sure. Well, first of all, you have to keep in mind that the State Department supports all the ambassadors throughout the world, and they're part of the State Department. And the State Department, obviously, they have ambassadors from 22 Arab countries and consulates. And then they have ambassadors from more Muslim countries. So a huge part of the State Department is already sort of friends with the Arab and Muslim world, and they identify with them. And Israel is a sole country that has one representative, and so you can see the imbalance there in the State Department. And the State Department very much believed that it would be a mistake for America to befriend Israel, to act on a moral basis, and thereby alienate all these Muslim countries and Arab countries. And they said, no, our interests lie with being friends with the Arabs, not friends with the Jews. And that's been the basic reason throughout the decades. And there appears to be no sign of change in the State Department.
Again, this is It Prophecy on Israel National Radio, Ruth Sheva, and the show is syndicated as Messiah Hour on YouTube. Again, go to YouTube and subscribe to the YouTube channel. We're continuing the conversation with Ted Belman from Israel Pundit. Before we go back to the United States and their relationship with Israel and the State Department, I want to jump really quickly to Canada because their Prime Minister, Stephen Harper, has been tremendous. He's been one of the few pro-Israel world leaders out there. I wanted to know your theory. We had on Leslie Ann Stoffel, and she tried to explain why the Canadian Prime Minister is so pro-Israel. What is your theory on why that is?
Well, his roots are in the evangelical Christian society in Western Canada. That's his roots, and Leslie Ann comes from Western Canada, if you all know. She's from far west in British Columbia, I believe. But in any event, that's his roots, and he is man enough to take the moral position and doing what's right because it's right. That's part of the picture, and very, very few people are prepared to stand up for what's right. It's all about not alienating the Arabs. So that's basically his position, and fortunately Canada has a lot of oil. We're oil exporters in Canada, and therefore they don't have to worry about the economic pressure from the Arabs having to do with oil.
Now, going back to the United States now, you mentioned, again, it's more of a State Department issue, not necessarily a presidential issue, but you spoke about that President Obama, what's different about him as compared to the other presidents is he goes a little bit, he puts the screws in, as you say, regarding the State Department.
Yeah, he turns the screws. Like he is doing his utmost to make the State Department policy dominant. And the threats that he has applied to Israel or Netanyahu have really been brutal threats. Now, that's not to say that other presidents haven't been brutal. They have. Bush Sr. Was with James Baker were brutal in the demands that they were making. They really twist Israel's arm and force Israel to capitulate. So, but even so, I think Obama is unique. He's unique in another sense. His entire life, like his adult life before he became president, he was aligned with the radical left. He was pro-Palestinian and went to all pro-Palestinian celebrations. He consorted with Khalidi, who was the spokesperson for Arafat. And so at a very gut level, he is committed actually not only to the Palestinian cause, but he is committed to Islam and does everything he can to promote Islam. So he is unique in his mental outlook also. No other president had his mental outlook.
And, yes, go ahead.
I thought I'd throw in the perennial bugbear, Jimmy Carter.
Right.
Jimmy Carter is also pro-Palestinian, and he's supposed to be a real moral guy and a religious guy, but he can't see the justice of our case at all. And he is constantly attacking us in inappropriate ways, and he was the one who called us an apartheid regime, and on and on. So he's another one that is, is really bad when it comes to Israel.
Yeah, Jimmy Carter's anti-Israel stance is unique. I mean, he wrote a whole book about it, and he didn't need to do so. And you're right, he has the whole born-again Christian image, but he is not looking into our best interests. Again, this is a prophecy on Israel National Radio, speaking with Mr. Ted Belman from Israel Pundit. Let's talk about the building freeze. It was supposed to be 10 months, supposed to be Jerusalem. You touched about that in your speech, and I want you to expand a little more on that, because I think there are many people in Israel that don't even realize that is going on. So tell us a bit about what exactly is the building freeze and where it pertains to.
When Netanyahu came to power, it was roughly at the same time that Obama came to power, and Obama started right off with his Cairo speech, announcing to the world that he was going to embrace the Muslim Brotherhood, essentially, as a very fundamental part of his policy. That was one key move, and many things he did after that regarding that. And the other key move was that he was going to enforce various Security Council resolutions that said Israel, that the building of settlements were illegal. Now, the Security Council is not a judicial body. It is not for them to decide whether something is legal or illegal. That's what courts do. And so the Security Council passed a couple of resolutions making that a definitive part, saying that settlements are definitely illegal and should be dismantled. And so Obama dismissed the Bush letter that allowed for our settlement blocks in Jerusalem to remain, and he wanted to go back to square one and take the position that all settlement construction should be stopped without exception. And so he twisted, and there's a lot of discussion about how brutal his pressure was. I think Ari Eldad described that he essentially put a gun to Bibi's head. I mean, that's how brutal, from Eldad's point of view, the pressure was. And Bibi decided to give the Bar-Ilan speech, which basically recognized two states for two people, and Obama had demanded that. And Obama also demanded a 10-month freeze, and that was the most, and Netanyahu agreed to the freeze, but that was such an outrageous thing because we didn't get anything in return. It wasn't that, Abbas was going to come and negotiate if you agree to the freeze. It was just agree to a freeze, period. And we'll see what we can do with that. And so when Netanyahu was biting the bullet on the freeze, he was at pains to say that we will never freeze construction in Jerusalem, and the freeze only applied to Judea and Samaria, and it was only for 10 months. And he kept making those pronouncements to make the medicine go down. And what happened ultimately is that the freeze de facto was on all settlements, including in Jerusalem, east of the Green Line, and was not limited in time. And even today, the freeze exists. So it was for the entire period. I think there was 1 year after the 10 months where there was some construction, but then it stopped again. And so that's the story about Netanyahu and the freeze.
Now, when you talk about that Obama basically put a gun to Bibi's head, I'm always curious when the presidents or anyone puts pressure on the Israeli prime ministers, is there something they could do? Could Bibi just tell Obama, no, I'm not going to do what you say? Would that be possible?
Well, obviously, you can say no, but the worry is that America will abandon Israel totally in terms of not exercising their veto in the UN, for instance. And they could really take a stance against Israel, but America is different than anywhere else in the world because the American people support Israel, maybe 70% favorable to Israel. That doesn't happen anywhere else with those numbers. And there's no way, in my opinion, that Congress would stand for such a position on America. But Congress isn't the one who exercises the veto, and if Obama started a practice of not vetoing Security Council resolutions, that would be very hurtful to Israel.
Okay, so that's
as one example. Or look at what happened in the Gaza war, the last war, where they stopped resupply of weapons. Also a very serious thing, because Israel never has enough weapons to have a prolonged war past a certain time limit. They're always affected by the limitation of their weapons, because you can't have an unlimited supply of weapons. So you say, well, I think that in all scenarios we need, for instance, a 30-day supply for all-out war. Now, I don't know if it's 10 days or 2 weeks or whatever it is, but you, as a matter of policy, decide how much you need in the way of weapons, making you dependent on resupply. And so America controls the resupply. And then America also put out the warning last summer about it was dangerous to fly to Israel. And
right.
Israel depends on those daily flights. So there's some very damaging things that the president can accomplish should he choose to.
Again, this is It Prophecy on Israel National Radio, Ruth Sheva. My guest this afternoon is Mr. Ted Belman from Israel Pundit. Yeah, if you could touch a little about that. Over the war in last summer, the war in Gaza, the FAA did not allow flights to Israel. How much of that was President Obama's influence, and how damaging was that to our economy that we couldn't get those flights in and out?
Well, fortunately, it only lasted for a day, I think. But it was entirely due to the initiative of Obama. The same way Obama, for instance, gets the Department of Justice to do all kinds of crazy things, he has his ways, and then also the IRS doing, a political hatchet job on conservatives. So the president can affect a great deal, and this is one of the things that he affected was the FAA.
All right, now, you had a great idea for a solution. I know other politicians have discussed that. Before we get to the solution, I want to know if you could touch about the American consulate is apparently hiring Palestinians to guard them, even though it's, my understanding, it's a violation of Israeli law. I wonder if you can tell the audience a bit about that.
Well, I think I'm not totally up to date on that simply because I was busy preparing my lecture for last night.
Right.
But essentially, it is contrary to the Oslo Accords. Never mind Israeli law. I don't, and all the different understandings we have, it is contrary to that. And they're obviously violating it, and they're acting like an embassy. There's a lot of things to object to what they're doing, and they're arming people that shouldn't be armed.
All right, that concludes part one of my interview with Ted Belman, who gave a fabulous speech on Monday, January 19th at the OU Center talking about the quote-unquote peace process. A lot of celebrities in attendance. Myself, my mom, David Bedeen, and many other people as well. It was a great, great event. We're going to have part two of my interview with Ted Belman momentarily. But before we go to break, I wanted to make a couple of announcements. Of course, I'm on JApp. You can get a lot of episodes of this program on JApp as well as Shirim. It's a Jewish application. And you can download JApp from iTunes or from Google Play Stores or from their website, www.j-app.me. So you can check out my episodes there. You can also find me on YouTube as The Messiah Hour. Go to YouTube, type in Messiah Hour with Ari Louis, and subscribe to the YouTube channel. The reason why that's very key is because the more subscriptions I get, the higher ranking I will receive and the show will receive in YouTube, and that will attract more people to the show who've never heard of the show before. So that's the idea behind it. So if you could show your support that way, that'd be very helpful. Again, go to YouTube and type in Messiah Hour with Ari Louis and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Tell your friends and family to do so as well, because again, the more subscribers I get, the more traffic I get, and the more listeners to this program. Also, if you want to make a financial contribution, that's another way you can help with the show. We start off this show originally once a week, if you remember, back in May. Now we're on, thank God, every day, Sunday through Friday. And my goal is to be on 3 hours a day. So for that to happen, I need help from listeners just like yourself. This show survives, it thrives due to listeners just like yourself. I've set up a PayPal account, IsraelSportsRadio@yahoo.com. You can write to me there, and you could send me a PayPal donation. Any amount is appreciated, $18, $36, $72, whatever is comfortable for you. Every bit helps. I want to improve not just the amount of time for the show, but also the quality of the show. If you're listening to this program, you're probably hearing it through one side of your headphones or one side of your speakers, one of your speakers. That's because I don't have the proper equipment for the show deserves and the audience deserves. So you can help make that happen. Again, PayPal account is IsraelSportsRadio@yahoo.com. Any amount is appreciated. If you want to give something to Kai, that would be great. And you can also email me, MessiahHour@gmail.com. We are very much an interactive show. Many shows we've done are due to audience requests. They write me an email, MessiahHour@gmail.com. They tell me a topic they want me or one of my guests to talk about. We try to hit that hard. We try to address it. We try to answer your questions. So if you do have any questions, comments, concerns, or complaints, as I like to say, it is a Jewish country, MessiahHour@gmail.com. We'll take a quick break, and on the other side is part 2 with my interview with Ted Belman, who gave a great speech at the OU Center on Monday, January 19th. He's going to talk about more on how we can handle this problem currently we have in the Middle East, what we could do to solve it, and the options out there, and how realistic those options are of actually taking place. So that's on the other side. This is It Prophecy on IsraelNationalRadio.com.